Hey, hello, welcome BlenderCon. Hi, my name is Michi. I'm a technical directing student of the Film Academy Baden-Württemberg, especially of the Animation Institute. And over the past year, I've been working on a framework that tries to increase the possibilities you have in rendering grease pencil. That is basically fully node-based. And yeah, I want to just present that to you guys over the next 50 minutes. Basically, what was the goal? I kind of wanted to work on a... I'm gonna put the chair away. I kind of wanted to have the possibility to relight my grease pencils, drawings and sketches. And also basically that meant I would need to do grease pencil shading, lighting, also set up a framework for more complex animation and simulation, and to also, I'll go into that later, do some spatial sorting and depth transitions to basically get a very painterly illustrated hand-drawn look, because everything is painterly hand-drawn. Basically, the core idea of how it works is that we have a node-based lighting engine, or like lighting functionalities introduced to geometry nodes, which basically allows you to generate a variety of render passes live on the geometry, and which you can then, the idea is that if you draw on 3D meshes, you can take these individual render passes and basically link it to your individual grease pencil layers and perform any kind of arbitrary operations, like obviously recoloring, so you change the color, but you can also do cropping, for example, or like a lot of different things to get, for example, a very hand-painted, or maintain a very hand-painted look throughout your rendering process. Overall, you can obviously do, for example, also more toon shading approaches, because you have access to your render passes, so you can build in like more like clamps, or you can basically do anything you could do with render passes in compositing. The goal is to make this framework available for everyone, so that, the Blender spirit, to kind of make sure that it stays open source and artists can use it all over the world. But I have to say that it's the first working prototype of something big. I'm just one person working on this. So obviously, I'm a little bit limited in how well I could implement it. And it's more like, a prototype of how we could work with grease pencil in the future, my idea of how you could work with grease pencil. So basically everything that's common in like software development, so accessibility, automation, functionalities, performance, quality, and documentation are still in their first working state, and definitely would, like at some point I would need support to kind of make more happen. And in theory, nothing of what I implemented is really new. Most of it is based on papers from the 90s and 2000s. But what's basically new is this bridge that Blender recently introduced between grease pencil and geometry nodes, which basically allows you to implement a lot of these ideas in a very pipelinable manner, and also very user accessible, because everything can be previewed in real time. So today I'll first try to go into my goals and motivations, then look at the development process, talk about some features and how the workspaces could look like, and then talk about the outlook, what the future steps could be. I quickly want to mention there's no AI or machine learning in the toolset itself, but some of the assets you see, because my goal is to integrate traditionally trained artists more into a 3D workflow. I've been investigating, for example, to do traditional illustrations in Procreate, to convert them to rendered images and then convert them to a 3D model, just with the goal to not replace artists, but to actually integrate them even more into the 3D pipeline like it wasn't possible before. So quickly about me, I started as a 2D artist. I turned 2D animator, did my bachelor's in 2D animation, but already during my studies went more towards 3D generalism. And then I recently started, or like 2 years ago, started my studies as technical director, though I took like an on-set footage. I don't do that much on-set work. So why do I say that? Because I don't have a software development background, so obviously a lot of it has been self-taught, so if any coder or like professional would look into my stuff, they'd probably get a nightmare. Okay, so yeah, like I went into 3D knowing that I wanted to do stylized rendering because it's just what inspired me around the time I made the switch. Also, a lot of stylized productions came out that were really, really inspiring to me and kind of made me realize, oh, okay, there's like a possibility for really artistic stuff in there. So I tried things like image processing, AI style transfer, reprojection workflows, particle-based approaches, and render pass manipulation, but I noticed something, that a lot of these workflows, you usually work either in a 2D or a 3D workspace, and the problem is that every time, for example, you try to go from 2D animation towards more 3D looks, it does become very, very complex, and like the workload increases like basically exponentially the more you try to go towards the other medium. The same goes for 3D animation, and that often ends up with like very sophisticated workflows that just aren't very accessible or easy to pipeline, because basically you're working against the workflow in which you're working, right? But in the recent years, I think we've seen like a sort of new approach kind of emerge, which is like this 2.5D animation motion graphics approach, because in the end, what I'm presenting today is more of a motion graphics framework, actually, if you would see it very, very strictly. But yeah, what makes this motion graphics approach kind of special is, like, for me, two keywords, and that's readability and artistic agency. What does that mean? Sorry. So basically, when you try to go stylized, right, you kind of move on this spectrum of representational art towards abstract art, and it's like you kind of decide how far you want to go with your style, right? But like if we think about how we humans kind of see motion is like a more stronger, like for us, more stronger visual stimuli than actually colors and shapes. Sorry, I forgot to take out the blue text. That wasn't on purpose. No, but yeah, like basically that means, for example, let's take the reprojection workflow. We can polish an image to be perfect in like a still, but the moment we start moving the 3D object, we suddenly don't read the strokes and shapes anymore, but the motion. That's why I think a lot of these styles kind of break down when you have too much 3D movement, is because we basically can read the surface again, and suddenly it's like this incongruency between like a painterly style and perfect 3D surfaces. It's, yeah, you basically need to find a way to deconstruct the surface and motion of like all your objects to really preserve the painterly style, because else you're again in 3D space. Then the other thing is artistic agency, and it's kind of, it's going to be very artsy, but this difference between medium and method, which on one hand might seem like the same thing, but from an artistic perspective, I would say there's like differences. Like I'll just take like acrylic painting as an example. If you try to paint acrylics with like very crazy like transitions and like almost like you would use oil paints, right? You use it as a method because acrylics is like a color that dries quickly, so you wouldn't do that. So you would more use it like impasto. And then you use it as a medium because you highlight basically the medium you're using and not try to or adjust your style basically, and also the result based on what you use. So that's also what I kind of meant with this 2D versus 3D approach, where you're just working against the medium that you're trying to achieve, right? But there's kind of a little problem with this motion graphics approach. It's relatively novel in productions. So there's like a lack of open expertise and very little software availability, which meant that if I wanted to get into it, I knew I had to do a lot of tool development. And on the other hand, it's usually also done in very expensive state-of-the-art software. So I'm a student right now. I knew I would develop this over the course of my diploma, so 1.5 years. And I knew that afterwards, I don't know where my life is going to go, so I might just work in a supermarket and want to do a film on the side. So I wouldn't be able to do that if I stayed in expensive software packages, right? So that's why I basically decided to stay in Blender as long as possible. Then let's just look at the development process. At first, tests I did, where I kind of tried to focus on this motion graphics approach and try to really deconstruct the 3D surface. In a way where the strokes individually would be readable. So the object is readable, but not the surface they represent, basically. And yeah, this was just some early tests, but I basically had the issue that it was like a very abstract workflow, so the artistic agency was still kind of ugh, and the relightability and general incorporation to 3D workflows was pretty complex. So I knew I kind of had to go a different approach. Around that time, there was also a project at the Film Academy, like a university that was interested in stylized rendering and wanted to do some test shots to figure out if they want to do a 2.5D production. So I did just some quick renders. This is only important kind of because it was the first time I built a path approximation in geometry nodes to basically be able to preview all the results in real time, so that the artist has also just more control in the workspace. And I actually got so interested in rendering and like lighting that I did a small research project on the side where I just tried to implement several lighting nodes into geometry nodes. And then I built some procedural stroke generators that could run basically on those passes, and you would get some pretty decent results because it had like already all the lighting information, and you could like orient the strokes and make them follow the lighting behavior. And give it like updates or like track it down. There was a lot of possibilities. But around that time, it was like basically almost a year ago, I was, is that how far I can push it? Because I had like a lot of layering issues. Also, I could only do strokes because fills were kind of complex to integrate into the whole system. And at the same time, the input pipeline was kind of very non-direct, and the artistic agency was very limited. But that's when I learned about the grease pencil geometry nodes integration and the new update. And I was like, oh, okay, I can't just put it in draw yet. I need to do a couple more tests. So during the break, I gave myself 1.5 weeks to do a first test shot. And within 1.5 weeks, I got some pretty cool stuff going. I would say that, like considering that, I mean, I had a full lighting pipeline, but just creating these assets was so simple because it's stylized. You don't need to do a lot of detail and stuff. It was like a lot of fun. So I knew, okay, like I need to continue working on this. And I decided to make it official, like part of my research project or part of my diploma, where I decided to focus on rendering stylized water and basically implement or like use my lighting engine, and at the same time focus on the grease pencil kind of integration. All right, so grease pencil obviously has a couple of issues. If for those who haven't used it, it basically works like Photoshop, right, where you have your layers. And a big issue is that they don't respect like their 3D positions, which means that you get like very messy results during the painting process because the layers are layered on top of each other, which makes rendering it actually quite difficult if you want to maintain these 2D layers the artist creates. So I knew I need to create like a sort of sorting, ordering step that would basically like process the grease pencil data in a way where it would rearrange it in like 2D space to kind of make it work without destroying the layers of the artist. And what I basically mean by that, I brought like a visual example. This is basically if you would render it in 3D space. There's a lot of intersection because obviously all the strokes kind of live on the same 3D surface. Which means that, yeah, you get a lot of intersections. Then you could, for example, a more simple approach would be to do per stroke sorting. So basically you look at the Z depth of each stroke and then sort them by that. But it's also breaking the system the look very, very hard because it won't respect the layers that the artist created. So basically what I decided to go for is a system that groups your strokes into different 3D parts. And within these groups, there's no sorting going on. I'll just use this slide. So you basically, you group your strokes into different parts that you know can't intersect. And then you basically check the Z depth of those and you sort them. And that allows you to do, some really, really complex like meshes that have a lot of intersections where you need to do a lot of occlusions. Really simply actually, because it's basically works of mesh islands. So you just need to know how to where to split your mesh, and everything will be grouped automatically. If we look again at this example, for example, where you can see the difference, you can see that the 2D layers are basically fully maintained, and yeah, you can basically still work with like a layered type of approach. At first it doesn't seem too complex, but especially when you start to get into spatial or like a scene assembly, it does get a little bit more, because you need to kind of have like an object solver, like you need to be aware of what object is basically what, or which sub-canvas, right? Yeah, that's when it like starts to get a little bit more complex. So the assembly stage of like grease pencil objects is geometry nodes based, so you need to do all the assembly in geometry nodes just so you can solve basically all these canvases. But what it allows you to do is quite broad. For example, you can have real-time instancing into your sublayers. You can also set it up, and I have a material library system that basically allows you to just select the material you want to select or you want to put in, and then you can relight the whole thing, everything in the viewport. So you can basically debug in real time when issues come up, which is, especially with the level of detailed transitions, a bit more of a topic. Right, so what does this assembly kind of look like? The idea is basically a little bit inspired from USD, but I'll just explain like that. Basically, at each stage, you want to create a 3D mesh, which becomes your canvas, and you put your drawings on there, which is basically like a texturing step. And the idea is that at each basically next step in the next like assembly stage, you can always add more canvases and also add more grease pencil drawings, which basically means that each step in the pipeline, you can always add more textures. You can just go in with grease pencil and just draw in more detail, which is very intuitive and a very, very cool, like I think very cool workflow from an artistic perspective. What could, for example, a geometry nodes workspace look like? You can make it pretty simple. Like, for example, right now, it's just one node per layer, where you decide which level of detail the layer lives on, for example. So when it starts blending in on camera distance, you declare your layer, you set the material ID, and then just decide on your canvas, and that's pretty much all you need for that. And then you have like a couple processing nodes, and for example here you can see what it looks like to sub-instance, like for example these stones on the canvases. Right, so what are the pipeline implications, or like why does all of this work? Like the idea was basically to implement a pipeline that could work fully in geometry nodes. So the idea is that basically you stay as long as possible within this one context, which means that suddenly you gain access like through geometry nodes themselves and the new modules I've created. You can basically do almost each pipeline step inside of geometry nodes, which in theory means you could go from like an empty file with no dependencies to a fully rendered city and everything you can do in geometry nodes, along with lighting and passes in just one node. Which means that you can create your workspaces very flexibly, and at each step you basically get the same data as the step before, so it's not really dependent on too many external factors or like too much differences. Then I obviously developed some more utilities. For example, we have like for the whole water system, which was kind of part of like my major part of the diploma. The whole framework around was more private time from me. But you, for example, have stroke generators and fill generators that can run on the render pass or like on the lighting passes you do. And the idea is also I implemented some simple color tracking so that the strokes would kind of try to follow like their color. So you would get some more complex stroke behavior, not just following the mesh perfectly. Then I already teased a little bit about this level of detail solver, where this idea is that you can basically put each of your layers on an individual like LOD, and but like this basically blend between all the layers, so you basically maintain a coherent visual like complexity, which is very important for stylized rendering, so it just looks like hand-drawn, right? And also like a huge opportunity that's not on my part, that's just Blender, is that even after all this procedural generation, after all these like deformations, you can bake everything back out into traditional layers and just paint over it. You can edit every single stroke. It's not in like a black box, it's not pixel based. It means you can really still do anything with it. Like you could just start your whole pipeline over and just import it again and do some relighting and everything. So that was kind of the idea. I've been like way too fast with my talk. I'm already almost done, I'm sorry guys. Yeah, so what are the next steps? What is kind of the outlook? Basically, I'm gonna for sure want to publish my node tool sets I have currently and make them available for free or like on a name or your own price basis. And then it's kind of up to you guys how much interest there is, who's interested, if it's more the artists or if there's actually studios and technical people. I just wanted to kind of throw it out there and see how you guys react, how the Blender community likes this kind of stuff. And with that, I want to say thank you for your attention. I'm sorry it was so quick. I was a bit nervous. Thank you. And yeah, so we have a lot of time for Q&A. Yeah. Yeah?
Could you go back a couple slides and explain what was going on when you had the window open and you were adjusting, like, this is black that we're filling in?
With the Hello BlenderCon written on...
After this. The stable.
Yeah. What's with that? Okay, so it was basically like one of my very early test scenes where I tried my water modules. It was this was still fully procedurally generated. Like I didn't paint anything back then. It was still like I was like way too focused on procedural generation. But the goal was just to see that everything I generate and simulate and animate kind of afterwards, I can just edit, you know. If I like it, sometimes you get strokes that like are clipped wrong or that just don't work. And with this like idea of grease pencil, you can just go in, select a stroke, delete it or recolor it, or like put a blur on it, or you can even still use multi-frame editing. Especially like I kind of want to try it for character animation, because if you can have like this kind of sculpting step after like the initial 3D animation, and you can solve a lot of things not in the rig but actually in 2D space afterwards. Like I just see a lot of possibility in type of workflow because you still have access to all the data. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I have an idea for how to fill up the rest of the time of the talk.
Yeah.
Because I'm an artist and the only thing I was missing from the incredible talk is like a case study of sorts or a workflow example how the stuff that you showed actually implements into a pipeline. Because I see that it's so amazing that I can't wrap my head around just yet how it implements into work. So
Yeah, well, wait, maybe the best slide for that is right here. So basically the idea, right, is you say you model like a stone and you know you want to create like a cobbled street. You can like draw several levels of details on the stone where I draw like the BlenderCon stuff on there. And within geometry nodes, you can basically create instance locators and then put that into like the other grease pencil drawing, like the greater assembly, where you create like the next level of assembly, basically. Where you can again like just where you just then append this and you get like these meshes you created and the grease pencil. Like just imagine that the grease pencil you draw are just like textures and they come with always meshes. And these meshes kind of, you can treat them like in a normal 3D pipeline-ish way. I don't know, does it help?
for example, what simulations that you
Okay, thank you.
So is this like you simulate this in 3D first and then paint?
No, for the water types of simulations, for this one, I used the Blender Ocean generator, the Blender Ocean modifier. And for this one, I didn't draw anything. It's fully procedurally generated, so I just select the type of ocean I want. I put my one node on there, and this is kind of the result I get. I mean, it's obviously like for each look you want to create, for each type of render, you will need to do some heavy node work, but once you have your style set up by a TD or like by someone more technical, you can do quite a lot of things. And this is for procedural generation. Like most of the other assets are still accessible for artists by just putting a lot of the solving parts, into the back end. But yeah.
So for example, you could just in a specific pipeline where you say I want to have like more rough brush strokes, you could tweak that in a way that fits the art style and in the end make it out as normally kind of object and like tweak the whiteboard for example so that it's splash in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, tweaking the white water would be difficult because either you would have to draw details on top or like resculpt it and stuff. Like you just have the possibilities Grease Pencil offers you. Like to really get good results, you would obviously have to simulate it or to hand animate it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
So when you said you back to the sailboat slide, you said you procedural generated. You already had a 3D scene with the sailboats in the water, and then you applied your geometry nodes to that to generate this pencil.
Exactly, but it was like a very low poly scene. It was basically just a couple planes, and like I think the one boat there was an actual 3D model, but all the other boats were literally just planes I cut out so that the procedural stroke generator could run on top. No, it's like.
Likewise, for the test you had done during your break for the answers, was that was also a simple 3D scene, or was that somebody else's 3D scene?
No, that was also my own 3D scene, and it was also very basic in terms of geometry, because that's what kind of I love about stylized animation, is that you only need to add as much detail and work into anything as you want to display, right? And especially if you look at paintings and stylization, you don't need a lot of detail to carry your meaning or your impression. So exactly, that was kind of the idea that, for example, I don't know, like the dancer model itself, it was maybe 150 words. Like even for a low poly production, it would have been like, oof, that's a few polys. Yeah.
Lighting that scene. Could you go back to that scene?
Yeah, sure.
Look at it?
Oh wow, yeah, here we go.
So, since this is all Grease Pencil, you're now using it, nodes to figure out where the lighting is, and is that matching sort of what the lights in the 3D scene were in, or is that like a separate set of instances that then are applied to the geometry nodes to figure out where the lighting is?
You basically register, like you do all your lighting through nodes. You don't really work with standard Eevee or cycles anymore. But it does match up quite well. It's only when you really start to get into second, third, fourth bounces where you will see a lot of noise and issues. But it's stylized rendering, you don't need more than one bounce. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
One part I didn't quite understand is at what point you want to preserve the strokes of the artist on the canvas and at other points you want to generate strokes at will, like for the object, I guess. So in these two different parts of the art, of the tool, like some parts to preserve what the artist did and other parts to generate specific style and wants to reach for.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for example, this was specifically because it was my research project. You could try to find a way to paint water like lines and then move them with velocities and stuff. But yeah, like the idea is that you can have still all the functionalities of 3D, like procedural generation, like yeah, all these functionalities that you just get from this workflow, but also still have all the possibilities of 2D animation and basically incorporate that so you can build your workflow basically. Because in the end, like the tool set is kind of meant more to be used to, like right now I can do like 2 or 3 styles with like hatches and stuff, but you would obviously for each style you want to create, you would need someone technical to do the node setups with the nodes I kind of provide. Because it's stylized animation, there's like so many exceptions, there's like so many different approaches that you just need to, for each style kind of develop custom scenarios, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you have a vision of whether the tool set is specifically made for artists versus TVs or somewhere in the middle?
Like it's made for teams. It's like the goal is to make it, like my goal was to make it for artists, but obviously there's like a technical hurdle where you just can't go, where like every time you simplify something, it comes at the cost of flexibility. So that's also kind of this outlook thing. If there's more just individual artists interested, I'm totally willing to like revamp the framework a little bit just to build tool sets for artists like modifiers to use on their grease pencil objects, to add lights, for example. But if you really want to go like far and or like really push it into whole scenes, then you definitely will need someone who's well versed in nodes and 3D like processing, yeah. Yeah. I'm not really hearing that, I'm sorry. Can you repeat a bit louder? I didn't really catch that.
I'm interested in like the approach rendering because I see that there is some GI
Mm-hmm. I mean, it kind of works like a game engine, I guess, where a lot of it is approximated in 3D space, not screen space. But for like, for example, reflections, refractions, I do some ray tracing, but I never go above like 2 or 3 bounces. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like technical details will kind of become maybe a bit too much of the individual like pass solvers, because the idea is like you don't have like a node that will generate your final lighting. You just generate the individual passes, and you will have to comp them yourself to basically get your final look, because the goal wasn't to create something like cycles or Eevee. It was just to make available those passes that you can link them to your grease pencil layers, so that you have like as direct possibilities to relight it as possible. Yeah? Oh, that wasn't, yeah.
Back to the scene. So, if you were to pull this up in the viewport, it's called 2D rendering, or is this rendered in 3D space?
Oh, that's all in 3D space. It's still living in 3D space, just so you maintain this idea that you maintain exactly the same state at every point. You could basically compress it to like a 2D image, because like it's like SVGs, right? So it knows like which stroke is like in which order. So you could always compress it back into like a flat image, and basically could even do editing. Well, yeah.
The idea of either by hand paints, as you were saying, get strokes onto various objects, or even using that could have the regular brush stroke thing.
Yeah.
This opens up so many possibilities. It's the sort of thing that before I started this talk, I was worried that maybe I have some sort of AI set up. This would allow you to do it all
yeah, that was kind of the idea. Yeah, I hope some people are as excited about this as I am. Yeah. Project goal, I would say that it's like a lot of, I guess, with like how the stroke generators work. Like right now, my stroke generators don't support any like artistic input. They run like fully by themselves. So I mean, you could implement it quite easily that it would, like that you can create guide curves and stuff like that. But that wasn't the goal right now because I was like working on water mostly. So for water, you don't need guide curves, or at least it changes so much. You don't want the guide curves to be like constant, and then you need to, yeah, there's like too much solving involved. So yeah, it's like, thank you. And I guess it's also just with the rendering that it's rendered with like the grease pencil engine. So that means you maintain, there's like no intersections. You don't use like cycles or Eevee, but like every stroke can, like you basically don't have like on the different parts of the stroke, you don't have different results. You can approximate them like once per stroke, and then you get exactly the right shadow value like at this point, and it doesn't like change over the stroke, right? Because it's like rendered in 3D space. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Any more? Well, thank you for coming. Oh yeah, if you want to connect, here's my LinkedIn. Write me what you want to see this develop as. Or if you want to get early access or something, like I can only release it probably next March because it's still part of my diploma studies, so I need to clear the rights with my university and everything. But the moment that's all done and the grading is done, I can make it available to everyone. So I'll post it on my LinkedIn.